Hey, Sean from the Commander's Brew. Gonna brew around Hinata Dawn Crown from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. New Jeskai Commander. I'm gonna dig deep on the abilities and see what we can do. I'm not gonna give you a deck. I'm gonna teach you to deck. Hinata Dawn Crowned. It's a 4 mana 4/4 in Jeskai colors. Reasonably cheap commander. You get flying and trample, which is always nice. And the two key parts of the card are that anything we cast that targets things costs one less per target, and anything our opponents cast that targets anything, whether it's our stuff, other opponents' stuff, their own stuff, costs them one more per target. I suspect most of their spells will cost one more max. I don't know how many things will be multi-targeted, but I'm going to look at different ways of breaking this down to get as many targeted things as possible. And it really just affects targeting. So it's kind of like a nicer version. It's not, doesn't seem like it's built to be super stacksy, you know? Can we build a nice version of this, or do we have to go crazy stacksy? Played a lot of that video game back in the day.
Hey, come on over, have some fun with Crazy Taxi!
So the first thing I want to look at are the coolest X spells, the spells that have unlimited targets, because for every target we add, it doesn't add one more mana, which is usually how these spells work. Comet Storm, that multi-kicker, every additional target is an extra one, but Hinata cancels it out. So basically it says red, red, X, deal X damage to as many targets as you want. Heliod's Intervention, same deal. We get to destroy all the artifacts and enchantments we want for a mere white mana. That's pretty incredible. Similarly, Curse of the Swine works on creatures. We can exile as many as we want for a simple blue and turn everything into 2/2 green boars. And there's not just X spells too. There's plenty of spells that have multiple targets in one card that we get hefty discounts on. Sublime Epiphany, target spell, target activated or triggered ability, target non-land permanent, target creature you control gets a token copy, target player draws a card. I mean, there's way more targets on here than we can discount it by. This is blue counter spell plus a million other things. Love this card. Hate Mirage is interesting too. It's a 4 mana sorcery which goes down to 2 because we're going to target 2 creatures we don't control and get token copies with haste that we have to exile at end of turn. That could be a massive swing for just 2 mana. Decoy Gambit, another cool instant that ends up costing a single blue. For each opponent, choose up to 1 target creature that player controls and bounce it. Unless we're down to 1 opponent, this is going to cost a single blue. And there's a world where having a mere 1 discount isn't enough for you. Maybe you want extra discounts per target. So we're going to figure out ways to copy Hinata. Spark Double's becoming a new staple because we get to clone something, but it's not legendary, so it works on commanders. But the price is being reflective of that. It's almost up to $10. And once we've got a non-legendary version of our commander, we get to do things like Sakashima's Will on it, and that's 2 targets again. And we got Mirror Box recently printed, so now the legend rule doesn't apply to permanents we control. So if we wanted to, we could build in a ton of clones off of Hinata and just get massive discounts on our X spells. Oh, and I would just want to take a second to talk to the designers of Magic the Gathering, in particular the Planeswalker decks that used to come out. I think I've found out that you're copying each other's work. And I found these by looking for cards that target more than one thing. Jace's Ruse, 5 mana, return 2 creatures, search for a specific Planeswalker. In this case, Jace, Arcane Strategist. Grasping Current, 5 mana, return 2 creatures to their owner's hand, search for a specific Planeswalker. Jace, Ingenious Mind Mage. Rhythmic Water Vortex, 5 mana, return 2 creatures to their owner's hand, search for a specific Planeswalker. Mu Yen Ling. Ooh, you can do better than this, designers. I expect more from you than just kind of repeating last year's assignment. So there's so many ways we could go with this deck. There's just like, once you start looking at the cards in the game of Commander, in the game of Magic, there's lots of cards that target things that aren't necessarily where you'd think to look. Counter spells always target spells, so a card like Delay ends up costing a single blue. 3 time counters is quite a bit in the game of Commander. This probably won't come back anytime soon, and when it does, I doubt it'll be nearly as relevant as it was at the time. Negate works on non-creature spells for a single blue while Hinata's down. And then a card like Disallow gets discounted to being proper counterspell mana for just way more options. And there's card draw too that gets discounted. Some card draw spells let you target a player. That's a discount. Una's Grace is a little bit of a pet card of mine, and I've always felt it costed a bit too much at 3, but being able to retrace and pitch lands for 2 mana now seems like a fair deal to draw more cards. Deep Analysis, all-time fave with flashback, especially once it goes to the graveyard. Being able to pay a single blue and 3 life to draw 2 cards, I really like that. And Drown in Dreams. If we do control our commander, which we're planning to when we cast this anyway, we get to cast a single blue, ignore the 2, and then the X is maybe we could mill twice X cards if we have a lot of flashback in our brew, or just draw X cards. And it's no surprise that removal targets things. It generally has to if it's pinpoint, but there's a fair number of spells that have more than one target. Dawn to Dusk, although it only destroys one enchantment, also returns an enchantment from your graveyard to your hand. Pretty good if we end up milling ourselves. And Crush Contraband is an instant that exiles 2 targeted things, artifact and enchantment. It ends up costing us 2 mana. That's 1 mana per object exiled. This is all great. Hinata's a very fun commander. We're looking in Jeskai colors. We want to do something cool and interesting and not too salty, not too stacksy, because that's the way I like to play. I like an interactive table where everyone's doing a lot of stuff. And we still don't have a game plan. We're just slinging some spells. I mean, it's amazing that Comet Storm's a full one-sided wrath, unlimited targets, but we still have to pump mana into the X. I'm not planning on just doing infinite mana and Comet Storming everyone to death. It doesn't matter who the commander is. We can just make that happen in all sorts of decks. So I started looking at other things that targeted to see if I could find any themes or anything like that. And a card like Icy Blast brings me to a theme of tapping creatures. Again, X target creatures, so that means for a single blue, we can tap as many creatures as we want, and since Hinata is a 4-power creature, we've got Ferocious, and they won't untap during our opponent's next untap step. Something like Reality Spasm, again, the X is free, so we're just paying blue to tap X permanents or untap X permanents. We can untap a ton of lands if we wanted to figure out some sort of storm angle, but again, here's another way to tap a bunch of permanents, a bunch of opponents' creatures, including all their lands, enchantments, artifacts, etc. Powerful card that makes their whole board tapped. Gridlock, same deal, but it's just non-land permanents. That's a pretty interesting theme. We've got some really powerful ways to just fully tap down entire boards, more powerful than Sleep in a way. So maybe there's a way to goad our opposing creatures and just kind of make everyone team up on someone, take away their defenses, and just make them prey to the table's creatures. But alas, Besmirch is the only sorcery I found that actually says goading, and we have to gain control of a creature, and it's goaded later on. I don't love this card in this sort of strategy. And all the creatures that say that they target things after they enter the battlefield, those don't work with Hinata because on the stack, they don't target anything. So Hinata doesn't notice it. We don't get the discount that way. Sure, we could use all those goad cards that don't target things, but there isn't a ton of them anyway. So then maybe there's room in threaten effects, gaining control of target creature. And that's what Besmirch does in a sense. I'm a huge fan of instant speed ones, obviously, because we get to just rip control from a creature, have it untapped on our side in the middle of an attack, use it as a blocker when it was once an attacker, and just really mess up our opponent's game plan. I love doing stuff like that, but it has to be instant, and generally speaking, the instant ones cost a lot. But can they get cheap enough with Hinata? Active Aggression with those 2 Phyrexian red, which we get to pay 4 life for, and then the 3 gets discounted down to 2. So for a mere 2 of any color mana, we get to do this at instant speed. I love it. I think I want it in the deck, but I don't think it's enough to build a game plan around it. The other ones are just a little too pricey for my taste. It seems like this forced combat tap everybody's a bit of a dead end, Like we would need to amass a huge board full of creatures to make it work first. Or make Hinata into an enormous Voltron, but that's not what I'm feeling for this deck. I still don't have a solid plan, and I gotta wonder, is it possible to make this Jeskai deck and not just be the super saltiest version? Mass Manipulation is an X spell that gets much cheaper with Hinata. Instead of paying XX to gain control of unlimited things, we just pay X, which is a significant discount. I found these cards because when I was looking up threaten effects, the phrase gain control leads us right here. Blatant thievery for each opponent. I mean, I'm assuming it's a 4-player game as usual, so 3 opponents means this costs 4 mana to get 1 permanent from each of our opponents. Heck, even something like control magic is down to 3 mana to just gain control of enchanted creature. Pretty good deal, but salty. People don't like when you steal their stuff. And there's another potentially even saltier type of cards that sometimes has target player in the text. I'm talking extra turns. Time Warp. I mean, this is a pricey card. You're going to pay $12 for it, but target player takes an extra turn after this one. That's down to 4 mana. Coincidentally, the same price as Karn's Temporal Sundering, although we have to have a legendary down. I mean, we're planning on having Hinata down. There's 2 targets. Target player takes an extra turn and return a non-land permanent. 1 target non-land permanent. So this is another 4 mana extra turn spell with a bounce tacked on. Whew. So, I mean, I really don't want to make this the super saltiest deck, but I'm finding it difficult to find a specific game plan that feels unique. I've basically only talked about spells so far, so I'm looking at some kind of spell slinger deck, but I gotta be honest, if you're looking at spell slinger decks, we've had commanders that make things cheaper before. Mizzix of the Is Magnus, one of the original X spell type of decks with those experience counters and making spells super cheap. Recently, Vadrik Astral Archmage there's a real fun way to make Vadrik's power huge and get massive discounts on spells. Those big comet storms again, this has been done before. Galazeth Prismari has another twist on it too, just making a ton of trinkety artifacts and tapping them as if they were mana rocks. This is sort of another discounted spell. This is nothing new. And then I found it. The key to unlocking what Hinata can do that's a little bit different from all those other discounted spells is a little card called Indomitable Creativity. Because we get unlimited targets for X, the additional targets are free. This X spell works best with Hinata, better than those other ones. So for red, we can target unlimited artifacts and creatures. And for each permanent destroyed, we just go through the deck until we hit other artifacts or creatures to replace it. I've mostly been talking about spells, so we've got plenty of room for some choice creatures that we can almost guarantee that will hit. We can load up the deck with little trinkety artifacts, maybe some tiny mana rocks, which could get to our bigger mana rocks. There's lots of instants and sorceries that make little tokens that we plan to sacrifice. And the other key difference that Hinata has over those other Spellslinger type decks is we have white in our color identity. So if this is what we're doing, let's look into the white cards and see where we can go. I mentioned mana rocks before, and so a portion of this deck is going to be large mana rocks. When I do my Indomitable Creativity, I want to hit cards like Gilded Lotus to add 3 mana. Coveted Jewel also adds 3 mana, plus I'm drawing 3 cards. Even something like Thran Dynamo, although it adds colorless, it's still 3 mana. That's more mana to do more stuff with after we've landed things. Heck, if you've got $20 kicking around, spring for a Chromatic Orrery. That allows us to spend all this mana for any color to keep things rolling, and it taps for 5 instead of 3. Excellent card, but it's a $20 price tag. Now that we've got those mana rocks, which we're definitely going to hit, we've got room for some more creatures. So what are we going to do with it? I decided to look towards white. The thing that sets Hinata apart is that we've got white in our color identity. A lot of those Spellslinger decks are just red-blue. So when you start digging through the white cards, what are some good attackers? What makes combat interesting? Some big, giant, flying white creatures. And wasn't long before I found Hoffrey Ghostforge. 4/5, spirits you control get +1/+1 and have trample and haste. The haste is key here because I'm going to Indomitable Creativity into things and just give the whole team haste and probably do a massive ton of damage. Hoffrey also helps us out by that when non-token creature dies, we exile it, make a spirit version of it, and when it leaves, we return the exiled card to our graveyard. It's just good stuff. But along with Hoffrey, I'm hoping to Indomitable Creativity into something like Millicent, Restless Revenant, flying 4/4. It's going to get trample and +1/+1 in haste. And whenever it or another spirit deals damage, we get to make more spirits for future turns. Nobilis of War. It's a hefty mana cost, but we don't care if we're doing Indomitable Creativity. Attacking creatures you control get +2/+0. That's in addition to the +1/+1. And although this isn't a white spirit, this is a red one. This is Malignus. Power and toughness equal to half the highest life total. That's going to be massive power and toughness, and giving it haste and trample is pretty excellent. And of course, another spirit I want to land into is Returned Past Caller. It's a 4/2 flying, again, that pretty hefty attack power, flying, evasive, but it also returns target spirit, instant, or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. Maybe that's Indomitable Creativity if we hit most of our mana rocks and we didn't hit a lot of creatures. Maybe we have to do this one more time. Maybe we just want to grab a counterspell to just protect the team as we go, something like that. Tons of options. I think this is really cool. And heck, we've got access to cards like Shreds of Sanity. It returns up to 2 target instants or sorceries from the graveyard. So for a single red, we get 2 cards back. And for 2 blue, we can use Pull from the Deep to do basically the same thing. These are excellent ways to just keep the engine running. Tons of draw, tons of card advantage, and just slinging a ton of massive X spells, getting tons of value for very little. We got to protect Hinata, that's obvious. But the coolest thing is we don't have to cast Hinata until we're ready to go off with this. Hinata costs 4, and then we throw another 3 mana on the stack for Indomitable Creativity, and we're there. We don't have to expose Hinata in advance to our opponent's removal. We can just wait until the time is right. Whew. Fun deck. I'm glad we finally got there. It took a lot of thinking. I was getting real worried that this was just going to be a typical Jeskai deck, just doing the same old thing we've seen a bunch of times. But I think we carved out a bit of a new lane here. Let me know what you think in the comments, or if you want to brew Hinata a different way. Till next time, you keep being you. The world's a better place for it.